and my brother put the bazooka right next to it and put a big hole in the wall, and then pushed the bazooka through the wall and started firing. I was sitting in the front of the bus, and I saw that like a bus had turned over, and a mess and bodies everywhere.
Joining us today, we have Vahan. We're going to be having a little conversation where he's going to share some of the things that he's experienced in his life. So, Vahan, why don't you share a little bit about your upbringing and your childhood?
My name is Vahan Varian. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, of Armenian parents who migrated into Lebanon to avoid the massacre in Turkey. I was the youngest of five. I had three brothers and a sister. They've all deceased right now. I was the only child in my family who had any education above middle school. Graduated high school in Beirut, Lebanon. When I showed some interest into coming to the U.S. to go to school and get an education, my father thought that I was crazy because in our family nobody had education. I worked hard, particularly getting my student visa to come to the U.S. I chose to come to New Haven, Connecticut, where I went to school at the University of New Haven. Graduated from the engineering school, got a degree in mechanical engineering. Lo and behold, about a year after I was in the U.S., I met my wife, Nancy, and we got married in 1970. We were still in school. Then we decided to form a family, and we could not conceive, so we adopted two children, Wendy and Paul. It was one of the greatest things we ever did to adopt those children. It was just the most beautiful thing that we experienced. So I consider to have a very loving family. We have three grandchildren. I love them all, and we are just a one big happy family, and God has really blessed us tremendously.
So, why don't you dig in for us a little bit about your upbringing in Lebanon? How was that? How was your childhood?
Like I mentioned earlier, I was the youngest of five, so I was treated rather kindly and nicely because I was the little brother. Always called me the little brother. My upbringing was fairly normal, so to speak, in the ghetto where I was born and raised. It was a mixed neighborhood of Christians and Muslims. And at times, unfortunately, we had conflicts between the Christians and the Muslims. I never really cared for it, but because I had Muslim friends, didn't bother me, and I played soccer with those friends who were not Christians. There were some instances like in 1958 when Eisenhower was the president of the U.S. And overnight, the U.S. Marines landed in Lebanon. At the time, we were being threatened by Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt. He wanted to unify all the Arab countries. So the Marines came, like I went to bed at night, I woke up, the Marines are all over the streets everywhere. So that saved Lebanon from going with the idea of Gamal Abdel Nasser. We did have some right now, seems like an awful thing because we had a lot of guns in our house. Like we had a loft where we had grenades, we had what we call them Tommy gun, the small, automatic guns. We had bazookas. We had, you name it. We had at one point down the street, the Muslim population, they were charging towards us, the Christians. One of my brothers took the bazooka up on the roof. The wall on the roof was about 4 feet tall. and my brother put the bazooka right next to it and put a big hole in the wall, and then pushed the bazooka through the wall and started firing on the advancing Muslims. That was very scary, but he really wasn't trying to kill them. He was just shooting down below so that it will scare them, and which it worked. They ran away. They left all their guns behind, and at the time I was about 13 years old, 14, and my brother and some of his friends, they asked the kids like myself to go down to the street and gather all the guns and everything that the Muslims left behind and bring them to the house. So that was kind of a sad page in my history, because I didn't like the idea that we were fighting, with our neighbors, That's rather sad, I mean, it's unimaginable to most people here, especially kids that age, to go through something like that. So as I started high school, my parents wanted to send me to Jerusalem to become a priest. And I said, I don't want to become a priest. I mean, I love God, I love Jesus, I even loved it then, but I didn't want to become a priest because I wanted to become an engineer. And in my neighborhood, which was the ghetto, very poor neighborhood, if something goes wrong in somebody's house, like they can't lock the door, or the light isn't working or something, they would call the engineer, and the engineer was me. When I say call, no, there's no telephones at the time. They would come and get the engineer from my home and they say, take me over to their house and I would fix it to them. So in my neighborhood, they all called me the engineer. So it just turned out that
it was your destiny.
yeah, I was called the engineer, so I want to be an engineer. So I told my parents that I was going to come to the U.S. because there were a couple of guys in my high school, like 2 years ahead of me. They had come to the U.S. in California, and they had told me that they were working, paying their expenses, and going to school. Since I didn't have any money to come to the U.S., I worked my butt off and saved every penny that I could to buy my ticket, barely enough money to pay my first semester tuition at the college. So came to the U.S. and I had $25 in my pocket. Now, when I think about it now, it was just an amazing, feat that I was able to get out of that. So the third day that I was in the U.S. in New Haven, Connecticut, I got a job in a machine shop that this fellow that I met, he was from Syria. We were able to communicate in Armenian and Arabic. Those are two of the languages that we spoke in Lebanon. I started working in his shop, and he was incredibly pleased because I had never done any kind of machine work, so to speak, in Lebanon. But I was handy enough, and I had the mindset that I could do all that stuff. And he was paying me, at the time, this is in 1967, he was paying me $3 an hour cash. And at the time, that was a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. So when I wrote to my father, who was in the construction industry, and he was making $1 a day, 12-hour day, $1 a day, and I was making $3 an hour. My father said, it must be true then that in the U.S. all the streets are paved in gold. The school that I went to in New Haven was basically all male students because it was mainly an engineering school, and at that time there were not very many women becoming engineers. Of course, now that has changed tremendously, and I'm glad for it. And one of Nancy's friends, who was also my friend, at the time I did not know Nancy, Nancy being my wife of 56 years, I told my friend Silva, I said, I'd like to meet one of the women, the girls in your college. And that was all female school at the time, called Albertus Magnus College. Through Silva, I met Nancy. Even though in my mind, behind my mind, I had always the thought that I would graduate in engineering school, get a couple years of experience, which my student visa would allow me to do that, and then go back to Lebanon and marry my high school sweetheart. You know, like the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind, you know, long distance affair didn't work out. So after I met Nancy, I said, you know what? I think this is my destiny. You know, this is the one that I want to spend the rest of my life with. When I graduated in engineering school, I took a job with a company in North Haven, Connecticut. I did really well. You know, I advanced in the company. I was making decent money. As a matter of fact, speaking of decent money, my first job, I was being interviewed with my future boss at the time. And so he asked me what I wanted for salary. I said $7,000, you know. And he said, oh no, $7,000. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I blew it. I should have said 6,000.
Yeah.
And he said, 7,000? That's not enough. We're going to give you 8,000. Couldn't believe it, that they're giving me more than what I'm asking for. The irony about that is, when I went home, I said to Nancy, I said, hon, guess what? I haven't even had this job yet, but I got a raise, you know?
Let's go.
So anyway, that was very exciting, and worked there for a little while. Then my boss, not the guy who interviewed me, another guy, left the company and went with another company. And he called me about a month later. He said, hey, Vahan, would you want to come and talk to me? We have a position here for you that you'll be very well suited for. So a month later, I go over there, talk to my former boss. Lo and behold, I got a job over there, worked there, and had enjoyed tremendously. And then the opportunity came for me to take a position with Westinghouse Electric in Tampa, Florida. So we moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, adjacent to Tampa. Worked at Westinghouse for about 12 years. At one point moved to Pittsburgh area with Westinghouse, but we didn't care. We loved the city, we loved the people, but we didn't care living in Pittsburgh area versus St. Petersburg, Florida. So we moved back to St. Petersburg, Florida. Fortunately, we had not sold our house. We were renting it out. So we moved back into our old house. Old neighborhood was great. In 1983, we moved to Boca Raton, Florida. I took a job with an consulting engineering firm, and worked there about 4 years. After which, Nancy and I decided that we would go on our own, form our own company, which we did, and we named it Vahan Associates PA, you know. And that first year where we went on our own, we made twice as much money as I was working for this other firm. As we got better and better in what we were doing in consulting engineering, we were having a ball. We were having so much fun as we were really providing a service that there was no one who could provide the same service as we do. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine Bob told me, he said, you know, Vahan, he said, you have competitors, but you have no competition because nobody could do what we were doing because we were in it, you know, heart and soul. We did not spare anything. It was just an amazing feat. So we did that for about 26 years. We had our own firm, and then we sold that firm to one of our engineers who was very instrumental in our success in the business. So about 12 years ago, we sold it. Right now, we are happier than ever because we don't have to work and God has taken care of us financially and we are physically and mentally well. As I mentioned earlier uh, to you, Louis, is that I play soccer 3 times a week. And
And let the people know as well how old you are.
yes, I am 80 years old. I am the oldest soccer player in Boca Raton.
It's impressive because I don't
And
think I could play soccer.
yeah,
I don't even think I could play once a week. I think that would be too much for me, but 3 times a week, forget about it.
at 80, I can really outrun some guys who are 20 years my younger. You know, I can do that. As a matter of fact, at the last game, at halftime, one of the guys was asking me, how many more years am I going to play soccer? I said, until I'm 100. You know, I'm going to be 100 years old and playing soccer. If God continues to take care of my body the way He has been, I'll do it. Currently, I'm very much involved in soccer. By the way, I coached soccer for 38 years, starting with my son Paul when he was 5 years old. And then as time went on, Paul got married. He had the daughter, Sophia. So then I started coaching Sophia's teams, you know, not the boys, but the girls. And so I coached for 38 years. Currently, I don't coach, but I am the manager of adult group, that which we call it over 50. And Nancy, my wife, jokes about it, says under 100, she says, instead of over 50.
So, Paul, your son, who I'm friends with, he mentioned to me an interesting story which sounded tragic, which I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit about it, and something to do with that you were on a bus, and then I think you lost some friends who were in another bus. Would you feel okay sharing that, or?
That's a sad story.
No, I know.
Yeah.
He told me some of the details, but if you'd like to share it, you don't have to, but I think it's
No, I'll
very...
be happy to share. It just as though it happened yesterday. Well, in high school, once a year, a certain time of the season, I don't know when it was, I don't remember, the whole school, we would go to one of the mountains field trip. The school would rent buses and we will all pile up in the buses and go to the mountains. And this one time when we were up in the mountains and on the field trip, and we were getting ready to go back down to the city to our homes. As we were getting ready to get into the buses, the principal put me and another friend of mine in the bus with the 12th graders. And I think I was maybe 6th or 7th grader at the time. So this friend of mine and I were in the bus with the older students. And his whole idea was that if there were younger students in the bus, that they would behave, you know, which that was the thinking at the time. Before the bus started taking off, I got in the bus from the front doors, went to the back, and then came out through the back door. And so the bus took off, but I wasn't in the bus. I was in another bus with my friends. So as we started heading down the mountains towards the city, I was sitting in the front of the bus and I saw that like a bus had turned over and a mess and bodies everywhere. So I said to my teacher, who was nearby me at the time, I said, "Teacher," I said, "I think that's our bus." So lo and behold, it was our bus. There were 22 students, 21 graduating class, the older students, and my friend, the only one, the younger one. They were all dead, all of them. There was one student who did not go to the field trip, and that student was one of my relatives. Her parents would not let her go to the field trip because they said it wasn't appropriate for a woman to do that at the time. She was the only one who was saved from that accident because she wasn't in the bus. She didn't go to the field trip. So sad. So
I mean, it's tragic to hear, and it's obviously very sad. And I feel bad for all the families and the people who were affected. But it's also at the same time a miracle that you survived, because it sounds like you were supposed to be on that bus.
Exactly. I was supposed to be in that bus. For whatever reason, I got out off it, and otherwise I would have been dead with him.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Maybe you could also touch on a little bit something that you mentioned earlier, which is that you said you were escaping at some point from some type of genocide that was happening. Is that right?
Oh, well, okay. As I mentioned earlier, that my parents came to Lebanon. They migrated to Lebanon from Turkey. Father, who was 13 years old in 1915, and my mother, maybe she was 10 years old, they witnessed their parents being massacred, their heads cut off by the Turks. And that's the massacre of 1915, 1918 era. And it's only since President Trump took over the presidency that they asked or told Turkey that they would accept the fact that they massacred 1.5 million Armenians, and my grandparents being in that 1.5 million. I never met them, but that's the story that my father has told me. My father told me that he witnessed his father his head being cut off by the Turks.
Wow.
So my father escaped somehow and went to live with a Greek family in that area. As he got older, maybe he was 16 or 17, he escaped the area and came to Syria. He was in an orphanage in Syria. He became the baker in this orphanage. And in that orphanage, my mom was his helper, like assistant baker, so to speak. So they got married in the orphanage, my mom and dad. And then a few years later, they migrated into Lebanon. When they came to Lebanon, my parents had made a tent out of burlap sack. Yeah, they made a tent, and they lived in the tent. As they got a little older, so they started having children. My oldest brother was born in the tent, by the way. As my father particularly was a hardworking man, like 12 hours a day. He was in construction. He was able to build very modest home in Beirut. And that's where I was born. That's where most of my siblings were born. So that's the massacre of 1918 by the Turks. Now, I'm telling you this, but I do not have any animosity towards the Turks. I love them as people. I speak the language with them.
If I might ask, what was the motivation behind that? Was it like a religious thing, or was it like based on where the family was from, or what was that?
Well, the main reason was a religious reason. They wanted to have all those Christians, Armenians who are Christians, to become Muslims. And they were told that if you do not become Muslim, we're going to kill you. As strong Christians as Armenians were and are today, they did not want to become Muslims. They would rather die than become Muslims. So they massacred 1.5 million. The Armenians were the victims of hatred.
It's terrible to hear, but I thank you for sharing that part of your family history.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're here is a miracle on so many levels. Before we get ready to wrap up, do you think that you could share a little bit of wisdom so that you can pass that down to the people watching, to the upcoming generations?
For the young people, I would want to say, for one thing, you have to be very persistent. Never, never, never give up. Okay? If you fail once, you're going to get more chances. You'll do it again. And until you succeed. The thing that the young people have to realize is that everything is possible for those who live by the rules that God has given us. The kindness that you have to show to other people. Never, never think that someone else is below you. Never assume that you're better than someone else. Always, always think of other people before you think of yourself. It will work. It will pay off. It will be beneficial for everybody. I often thought of what can I do for you today that you can never return the favor. That's my motto, so to speak. Be kind, be generous, be loving, put others ahead of you all the time.
Those are some excellent words to live by, and I appreciate you joining me for the conversation today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.